Hello, welcome to Riot Act Reviews, part of the Riot Act podcast. This is another day, another review of another record that I am doing. Stephen Hill, that's me, that's who I am. And Remfry Deadman is joining me as ever. Remfry, it looks like you're wearing quite an openy, meatloafy shirt. Would that be accurate?
I'm just wearing a sort of normal work shirt, I guess, a black one. And I've just opened it up because
there's a fair few buttons being popped.
What can I say? I'm a sexy motherfucker, so I need to show that off.
I'm glad. You all right? You good?
Yeah, I'm okay. A little bit discombobulated at news things that we'll talk about on Friday, probably. But I'm excited to talk about this record by one of my favourite bands. So
good. Yeah. Yes, so am I. This is where we bring you our thoughts and opinions on some of the big albums coming out in the world of alternative music. Today, we are going to be chatting about Biffy Clyro, the myth of the happily ever after, the 9th full-length studio album from the Scottish alt-rock megastars to follow up to last year, 2020's A Celebration of Endings record. This is said to be a sister record to that particular album, in fact, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something Biffy do a fair bit.
Yeah, the companion album is quite an interesting concept, and it's not one that bands usually prescribe to that often. And actually, even when they do, it's usually for releases like they'll look back 40 years and they'll go, oh, there's quite a few B-sides on here which are quite good, and try and put something together that way. Very few bands sort of do it in the present in the way that Biffy do, but Biffy have done it for quite a few of their records. Puzzles had Missing Pieces, which was like an American release and download. Only Revolutions had Lonely Revolutions. And Opposites had Similarities. And in the past, it's been a place for the band to experiment and expand on some of their more unorthodox ideas, I think it's fair to say. I mean, it's not entirely clear whether this is the next in that series of records or whether we are to treat this as the new Biffy Clyro album. I'm not sure. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I was going to ask about this, actually, because I'm aware of those other Biffy Clyro albums, really just from you bringing them up. You are a bigger Biffy Clyro fan than me overall, I'd say, although I would consider myself a fan of the band as well. But you're certainly the more... you have a deeper... in-depth knowledge of their entire back catalogue. I was sort of vaguely aware of those albums, but I just sort of thought they were like B-side rarities, acoustic versions, remixes of some of the songs. But yeah, this does appear to be being treated probably for the first time ever, I would say. I will defer to you if you think that this is maybe not the case, but this appears to be the first time that Biffy Clyro are treating one of these companion piece albums as a proper full-length record as well. Is that right?
I would say that's entirely accurate. Yeah,
okay.
In my opinion. Whether we can call this one of the companion albums or not, it certainly started out as a companion piece to A Celebration of Endings. Here's a chance to plug and pull a quote from my interview with Simon from October last year. Go and check that out on the Riot Act feed. I asked him, is this a companion piece to A Celebration of Endings in the same way that Similarities was a companion piece to Opposites? And Simon said, exactly. It's exactly that. Basically, whenever we start working on a new project or a new album, it's so important to me to have no songs left over. If I'm writing in a 2-year period towards an album, I don't want to be thinking, oh, I had a pretty good riff 2 years ago, but it wasn't quite good enough to make track 1 on that record, but I'll keep it around. For me, I like to be quite brutal, so every single song idea I have that's hanging around, I really want to share it, so that each time we start a project, it's equally as exciting and terrifying and feeling like you're starting all over again from scratch. And then he went on to say a couple of songs are a bit more electronic, a couple are more keeping in the vibe of A Celebration of Endings, but the good thing about recording them outside of that album is we can kind of just push the edges. We can take them into much different areas now because we're not trying to make it a cohesive part of A Celebration of Endings, so it can be a bit more, chaotic, I guess would be the word. And I think that is a pretty, that was an interview conducted almost a year ago as we speak. I think just over a year ago, actually. And things change, so I don't want to hold Simon to those words exactly now because the project may have changed in his mind a little bit. But I think that is a pretty concise and decent summation of what we have with the myth of Happily Ever After. Would you agree with that, Steve?
Yeah, I mean, I think good for picking that quote out, Remfry. What I will say is if you go back and listen to that interview, Simon Neill's got a sexier voice than Remfry's.
I was half tempted to do it in Scottish, but I thought that might offend people, so I decided not to. But
yeah.
But Simon's got a far better voice than I do. Far better voice. I love Simon's voice.
Yeah, that sounds like a good approach. I mean, what I will say, for a little bit of a spoiler, if it's true that these are just the ideas that were left over from that last record, and this is everything, that's mightily impressive. But I think we'll get to that in a little bit. We should say that we were very positive about A Celebration of Endings.
My favourite Biffy Clyro album for years, and I re-listened to it in preparation for doing this as well, and I think it's a fantastic record. I think it's a great record. Really well.
And as well, we reviewed the soundtrack to Balance Not Symmetry, which is not even really considered a full Biffy Clyro album, even though it clearly is a Biffy Clyro album.
Yeah,
but it doesn't appear to have been counted as a Biffy Clyro album.
It doesn't appear to have been canonized, I suppose you could say. Yeah, I mean, I think there's some great shit on that record. Apparently the film that it was soundtracking wasn't too hot, but I think the soundtrack's great, really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, we said after, I think you and I were both fairly ho-hum on Ellipsis from 2016.
Yes.
I think that record, Balance Not Symmetry, kind of felt like Biffy throwing off the shackles once again that so many mainstream large rock bands obviously feel kind of tied to and a little bit neutered by. And Ellipsis was probably the first time I heard a Biffy Clyro album where I was like, there appears to be a greater consideration for what your normal stadium rock fan would want to listen to than there had been on any of the other records. And that's not strictly a bad thing if you write good songs.
Yes.
And there are
which Biffy often do.
Yeah, and there are a few pretty good songs and some really good songs actually on Ellipsis. There's also some stuff which felt a bit, to quote Lars Ulrich, stock, I would say.
Yes.
But Balance Not Symmetry was harsher and broader and more challenging and just weirder, I think, than Biffy Clyro had sounded for a little while. And I was delighted that with the Celebration of Endings, they didn't completely throw all of that out. And as they never really have, they never really just completely gone, we'll throw all these ideas away completely. But I thought what was great about A Celebration of Endings is that they felt really reinvigorated to write a proper Biffy, a quote unquote proper Biffy Clyro album after Balance Not Symmetry, when Ellipsis had been like somewhat shaky.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say, and I also think that's a large part of the reason why these companion albums are so interesting, because you get to see. I think I would say the experimental side of Biffy Clyro seems right at the forefront of these companion albums, more so than it is on their studio albums. Even an album as bold and experimental as A Celebration of Endings, I would say, because I think there's some really bold experimental stuff on that record. And actually, I mean, Opposites has some very experimental stuff on it. They've always had that, but it does feel like they just push it out, as Simon said, to the edges with these companion records. And there's even the song titles themselves, Dum Dum, Witch's Cup, Unknown Male 01, or in particular, I would say Slurpy Slurpy Sleep Sleep, have the air of a working title that never changed, which is fine, but it kind of gives the air that there's like less, I don't know if I want to say less thought put into these albums. Do you know what I'm getting at?
Yeah, I do. It isn't less thought. It's probably the opposite of that. It's probably
maybe
less, more experimentation musically, and less thought over. I guess less consideration as to what would be acceptable for a broad Biffy Clyro audience, a Reading headlining band.
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah,
because I think Biffy do probably consider their audience a little bit when they make records?
Yeah,
I'm sure they do. I think any band of that size, I think it'd be a lot. I think most bands would be liars if they said they didn't at least consider what that would look like or what that would sound like in front of lots of people when they know they're going to go and headline Reading or Download or play arenas, or do you know what I mean? I think people in bands of that ilk, I think even Radiohead, I think probably go, I wonder what this will sound like live, or I wonder how we can make this work live. I don't think there's anything wrong with that at all, but this maybe would be the point where they go, let's make these songs for us first and foremost, which I'm sure they do that anyway, but I think even more so, I think the kind of the consideration of how's this going to play out live, probably they just maybe never get to that point with the companion albums, because first and foremost you concentrate on the songs that are chosen to be on that record and how you make that record, and what you're left with can often be a bit more of a kind of hodgepodge of grand ideas and weird little things and things that you as a band might find funny or interesting or whatever. But it's pretty amazing that this is what they come up with, I think.
That's what this is an interesting exercise in, though, isn't it? It's an exercise in not coming up with new riffs, but sorting through the riffs that you have and finding ways to organically put them together. And I think Biffy Clyro, like this album proves, and it shows time and time again, that they are incredibly good at putting sometimes quite disparate parts together and making them seem seamless, which I think is a really underrated skill. And I think these companion albums are an exercise in that sometimes, and that's quite an interesting way to have like different approaches to different records. It keeps things fresh and it keeps things interesting. Like whenever we get a new Biffy Clyro album now, I have absolutely no idea what I'm gonna hear. I know I'm gonna hear something that sounds resolutely Biffy Clyro-esque because their identity is so strong, but I don't know exactly what sound that is going to take. I would say broadly, there's an awful lot of electronic stuff on here. There's an awful lot of synths and a lot of experimentation with what I would say are not the traditional instruments that Biffy Clyro warm to usually. But yes.
Definitely a lot of synth stuff, which we'll get into.
Yeah.
At the Brits, they were interviewed at the Brits earlier this year, and they said that the album would be positive but nihilistic, which in the mouths of lots of bands it's going to be heavier but more melodic, which is not what you want to hear any band say ever. But with Biffy, because they do seem to have such a strong grasp both on the expansive and the melodic, on the epic and the heavy, on the kind of angular and the instantaneous, that made me go, oh, that sounds exciting.
Yeah.
Positive but nihilistic. And I think that's kind of broadly sort of what this record is. I think there's some very positive lyrics on this record. There's some really kind of massive crescendos of woes and yeahs, but there's also some weird shit, like really weird, and
some really unexpected shit.
And not necessarily super heavy. Like we had Cop Syrup on the last album where we were like, oh, it's screaming and heaviness, and I don't think there's anything quite as instantaneously abrasive as that, but there are certainly bits in it where you go, oh, that's a bit jagged, that's a bit unusual, that's a bit sort of outside the box, isn't it, for a big rock band? So let's get into it then. Remfry goes track by track. Dum Dum opens the record, and this is how a big band should open a record, I think. If you are a band of, I think if you are a band of a significant profile, you want some kind of slow building, subdued into euphoric album opener. Because I listen to Dum Dum and I go, start of the live show, right? Open with that. Lights go down in an arena or on a festival stage. All the flash bombs and fucking pyro and shit starts going off. The video screens light up. You get a song that sounds like that. And that is how a stadium stroke arena stroke festival headlining band should probably open their set. And I think Dum Dum is, it just straight away, it screams set opener to me.
That's an interesting point, because it'll be interesting to see how they treat this material. If I'm going back and thinking about the previous companion albums, I'm still going to call it that for the moment, I think it's a rarity that they play anything from those albums live. So it'd be interesting to see if they put some of the songs from this album into their set as regulars or not. But yeah, I certainly see where you're coming from in terms of Dum Dum could open a very interesting arena live experience, the sort of thing that I think Muse would pull off or something like that. And I think Biffy have gone into those areas in the past. It is a song constructed primarily around soft synths sampled from Simon's voice, which immediately sounds like something that Biffy Clyro don't often do. So immediately you're off to the races in terms of like doing something quite experimental and a little bit off kilter for that band. It's a track that reminds me of some of the more electronic orientated tracks scattered throughout 2013's Opposites. It's quite spacey throughout, and Simon's repeating refrain of "this is how we fuck it from the start," I feel like likely refers to the pandemic, but it's also broad enough to relate it to any number of different interpretations. It's a brave beginning. And I have to admit, I've not always been convinced by Biffy's excursions into electronic territory, but I thought this was really strong. I like this a lot.
I really liked it as well, and it put me. I mean, it's what you say about these kind of companion piece idea albums. It immediately made me go, because I like Biffy Clyro. Am I enough of a fan like you are probably, or like somebody who's a kind of obsessive of the band, to go? Do I need the kind of weird stuff that was left over? Do I need the kind of the to boil the bones and sort of pick through every single part of the recording and writing process of an album cycle? I'm not entirely sure that I do. I like Biffy.
Do you need that on every album? That's the really brave thing about it. It's great, you know. Wow.
Yeah. To kind of use every piece that you ever create immediately. I'm always like, well, you know, obviously there's going to be stuff that maybe is slightly too weird, or maybe a little bit undercooked, or whatever, you know. Like I'm not sure I'm a big enough fan of the band to be like, oh, I need to hear every morsel of stuff that they do.
Understandably,
as opposed to a Nine Inch Nails, say, for example, where I'm like, whatever Trent Reznor does, I want to hear the fucking demo, I want to hear the whole thing. I'm not sure I'm that.
Hear him taking a shit.
I don't know about that, but then that coupled with Hunger in Your Haunt, which is the second track,
A Hunger in Your Heart.
In
your heart, Steve.
Did I say haunt?
Haunt.
All right, sorry.
Which is quite a nice turn of phrase.
Yeah, thank you. I think I just can't speak properly at the moment. Anyway, it immediately sounds like a single, this song. Yes. And I think it says a lot about Biffy Clyro that you can create a song with such a propulsive beat and quite a harsh guitar tone and quite a harsh vocal. They've managed to get this sort of thing on radio before. And I listen to this and I go, this does sound like the sort of thing that Biffy Clyro will be able to get playing on the radio during the day on quite a mainstream radio station. But if a new band came along and wrote this song and handed it in, they'd be ignored probably, which is obviously a real shame. It's obviously a massive shame. But because of the fucking woes and the yeah-yeahs and all the kind of woes and the yeahs and how propulsive this song is and how much it sounds like a single, I was like, I mean, it's great. I think the song is brilliant.
Yeah. As
sort of just discussed. And it weirdly feels challenging yet kind of mainstream rocky, which is very, very Biffy Clyro. Biffy Clyro indeed.
That's what Biffy do best, I think it's fair to say. And, you know, long-term listeners will know that when it comes to me picking singles, I'm not generally the best choice for that sort of job. But I assumed the first time I played this album that Hunger in Your Heart was the single, because it just screams singles so much. And I was really surprised. We'll get onto it later, but I was really surprised when I found out they actually went for Unknown Male 01, which is track 9 on this record. But But there's a spindly, spidery guitar line over this huge melodic anthemic chorus, which is more or less how I would sum up 50% of Biffy's latter-day output. But this is a very fine example of it, so I'm totally fine with that. Personally, I didn't need the whoa stuff at the end. I'm never a massive fan when Biffy do that, I have to admit. It's one of those minor things, and it doesn't bother me enough in any way, shape or form. But when they do go into those stabbing guitar chords at the end, which immediately conjure Vertigo of Bliss style, or even the intro to Living is a Problem Because Everything Dies, you're just like, this is Biffy Clyro. This is no one but Biffy Clyro. No one's singing at this point. You know, it's just the band doing these guitar stabs, and that is a Biffy Clyroism now, you know? It just is.
Definitely. What it made me think as well was after 2 songs, I was like, this is an album. This is a proper album. Immediately, I feel like this is not some weird companion piece of experimental, unusual, undercooked, quickly hashed together stuff. This feels like a full-blown proper record. So if you're thinking about going into you know, it's just kind of the stuff left over from the last album, that may or may not be the case. I don't really know. That may or may not be the case, but I feel like I'm happy straight away, 2 tracks in, to go, it's a proper Biffy Clyro album.
I half agree. I think by their very design and by their nature, because you're collating together a bunch of riffs which, you know, may have been written in the same session but don't necessarily relate to one another, and trying to make them to relate to one another, I don't think it is as cohesive a record, let's say, or a thematically cohesive record as, say, A Celebration of Endings or Only Revolutions or anything like that. But I think they have done enough to make it cohesive enough. And when putting the disparate parts together and thinking of I believe they have been thinking of the album as a whole when trying to put it together. I don't think I could hand on heart say this is as cohesive as anything that Biffy Clyro have ever done. I know you didn't say that. I've slightly exaggerated what you said, but you know.
Massively.
But, yeah, yes, I have actually. Apologies. But yeah, it does feel like an album, just about.
I think so, yeah. I really like Denier as well. I was wondering what you think of the woo 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 bit, that the hook. That's again, that feels really Biffy Clyro as well. That kind of woo 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 woo, like,
yeah. No
one else really vocally does that in rock music, I don't think.
Yeah, that like owl thing.
Yeah, that kind of hoot. And anytime Simon's voice gets a bit stretched and a bit ragged and a bit frantic is always going to be good for me. I don't think it's one of the best songs on the album, but it is good. I'm still 3 for 3 at this point.
Yes, I'm definitely 3 for 3. It's one of my... no, I was about to say it's one of my least favourite on the album. It's not one of my least favourite on the album, but it's one of the ones which I'm just like, this is a cool song, but I'm not totally like bowled over by it or anything like that. I do really like the fact that it's quite... I mean, this is what Biffy do brilliantly. It's actually quite a complex song and quite a weird song, but they just make it sound really anthemic and massive and poppy and not weird in the slightest. The bass is the main driving force and the main driving riff in this song, which is, you know, in and of itself quite unusual. And Simon's just sort of playing around that. So I love the fact that Biffy Clyro can do that and make it seem like the most natural thing in the world so seamlessly and so easily. Brilliant.
Yeah, I do like it. Separate Missions, the last song, the next song. I thought I'd accidentally switched on that new Duran Duran album when that came on, because that does seem like something that could have been on the new Duran Duran. It's very synth heavy.
Well, I wrote down Depeche Mode. I thought Depeche Mode is maybe a little bit more accurate just because it's a bit darker, and certainly that gloomy bass line that underpins those synths when that comes in. And then when you get the synth sort of stretching itself to the point where it sounds like it's digitally dissolving in a pool of digital acid, digitally.
Say digitally again.
It's a pretty harsh noise for an arena filling act. It's the sort of effect that I would expect maybe a lingua ignota to use or something like that. But it makes the chorus, when that does come in, all the sweeter with Simon's falsetto vocals and those shimmering guitar chords. They feel like a calming balm upon my ears when that comes in. I think this is a really cool... This is definitely one of the more experimental ones and one of the more electronic ones, isn't it?
Yeah, but it still sounds like Biffy Clyro.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing.
I think that's what really impressed me about it, because I was like, this is so far away from what... When you think... If I say Biffy Clyro to you, or you listening, whoever, you will have immediately... a sound will pop into your head, right? Whatever, and that might be, if you're a fan of the early stuff, it might be something a bit more jagged and angular and a bit weirder. If you've been a fan since the kind of Only Revolution's sort of commercial high points, it might be something a bit more...
It'll all be different, but it'll all be identifiably Biffy Clyro. That's the bonkers thing. Yeah.
But it won't sound like separate missions.
No.
But yeah, it does still sound exactly like Biffy Clyro. I think that's an incredibly hard skill to pull off. Really, really difficult skill to pull off. Yep. And then this is the point where I was like, fucking hell, Witch's Cup.
Good.
Which one of the best starts to a song of the year. All this brass and orchestral bombast or bombast. Sorry, I can't speak at the moment. Bombast, not boombast. That's Mr. Boombastic.
There is a Biffy song called Boom Blast the Ruin, though. So
yeah,
that's all you would do. You were just doing that, right?
I think I was just doing that. Yeah, really, it's not relevant, but fine. And then it just stops and it goes really quiet. It turns into like Say It Ain't So or something. And this is amazing.
Say It Ain't So or something.
Yeah, this is
a lot of sibilants in that. So I was enjoying the sibilants. I apologise.
Yeah, that's good, fine. I really respect Biffy Clyro as a band because of things like this. Because again, this essentially, you put it on and you go, oh, it's obviously Biffy Clyro, but it's Biffy Clyro doing a really kind of quiet Weezer song meets the Divine Comedy without sacrificing the thing that makes them really unique. And the chorus, right? And the last time I compared a band to this band, I did it with Enter Shikari and I got loads of fucking grief for it. People are like, right, I'll cry. Please note that I do not believe this to be a bad thing. But the chorus sounds like a modern Take That song. And I mean that.
Charlatan.
I mean that in the nicest possible way.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really massive pop hook.
Yeah.
This song's fucking brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, the trumpets or the horns or whatever it is sort of immediately recall the Captain for me, although they are done in a very different way. And then, yeah, as you say, very quickly...
Captain Birdseye. Is that what you mean?
If you like, yeah. And then very quickly reduces itself down to just Simon's very soft voice and an organ type effect, I'm going to say. I think the album does this quite a lot and basically goes from a big bombastic beginning and then goes down to a quiet verse, which is quite a... that doesn't feel like that doesn't feel like the most common thing to do. It feels like you start quiet, go loud, then go quiet, then loud, you know. And I was wondering if that was related to the fact that Biffy Clyro were really excited about potentially touring this new record, A Celebration of Endings, last year, and then suddenly they were let down because of the global pandemic. And I had no idea if that was something that was written into it or not, but I kept noticing that pattern in the songs. It felt like being really excited about something and then being let down. And whether that is on purpose or not, I might be reading... I do feel a little bit conspiracy theorist when I say that. I might be reading way too much into it. But I noticed that as a pattern, and I wondered if that was related to that.
It is an interesting hypothesis, Remfry.
It is.
At the very least. Yes. And I noticed it as well, although I didn't put those two things together. I just thought, what an excellent grasp of dynamics this band have.
Yeah, exactly. But I think you know, I mean, Witch's Cup, you could say it's like Biffy Clyro meets Satanist era Behemoth in lots of ways, you know, with those horns and stuff. And it's a as hell, yet catchy. Hell. Like, really, really catchy. And that's a contradiction that Biffy excel at and have pretty much their entire career, I think.
I mean, the fact that I don't feel like that's a weird comparison whilst also comparing them to Take That and the Divine Comedy.
Yeah.
On that song.
Behemoth, Take That and the Divine Comedy. That is astonishing. It'd be astonishing if you could get all three of those influences across one record, let alone one song. This is one of my favourites on the album, and it sounds like it might be. Yeah.
I love this song. Yeah, it's one of my favourites. Holy Water is one of the slowest songs on the record. I personally felt that when we got to a celebration of endings, it wasn't actually around this period, but it was the song Instant History was the one where I was like, oh, I'm not so sure about this song. I didn't really like it at all.
Just a quick update. I still love that song. Like, it came on yesterday when I was listening to it. I was like, I know Steve isn't into this, but I really think that's a great song. Instant History.
Yeah, I listened back to it just to double check that I could still sort of say that, and I do still find it like a little bit too Mallory Knox for my liking, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I wondered if this was going to be the sort of equivalent track to it, but actually, I think, particularly by comparison, this is a far, far better song, and it's actually not really a ballad at all when you get to the end of it, is it? I mean, it's not. It's actually because I've been doing my notes. I'm like, oh, it's the ballady one, and then at the end, I'm like, oh, and then you get a big Deftones Meshuggah riff at the end of it for something which starts with an acoustic guitar. I guess we're making it sound like there's a lot of shit being thrown at a lot of walls at the moment, but again, the through line through all of this is it always sounds like Biffy Clyro. The nice bits on this sound really, really nice, like a really nice Biffy Clyro song, and the heavy bits, that kind of doomy Deftones style riff that comes in at the end, which I thought was fucking excellent. Yeah. But tonally, again, very, very Biffy. It's really good. This song is really good, especially when I suddenly went, oh, okay, this might be where because it is quite floaty and quiet and a bit more mainstream sounding at the start, and I was like, okay, that's not enough to completely put me off, but what's going to happen? By the end, I was like, oh, you silly fool.
This is fucking amazing. This is one of my favourite songs on the record. I think it's absolutely fucking amazing. I believe I'm guessing here a little bit, so, don't hold my words to account, but it makes me think the way that this song goes, the fact that it starts with a part which is so different to how we end. It makes me think that maybe it started out as two separate ideas, or maybe even three separate ideas, which were just completely apart from one another, probably written at totally different times, maybe in totally different places. And it feels like this song in particular, and there's a few like this, but this one in particular feels like an exercise in trying to put those parts together and make it cohesive. And Biffy do, and it's astonishing. If you listen to the first 30 seconds of this song, then you listen to the last 30 seconds of this song, you just be like, how the fuck do they get from A to B in 5 minutes or something ridiculously short like that? But they do, and it is seamless. It is completely and utterly seamless, and that to me is just brilliant songwriting. I think Holy Water is brilliant. Yeah, it starts like Machines, the last song on Puzzle, and it ends like some sort of Meshuggah, Deftones. It's a metal riff. Like it's the metal rhythms and the double bass and like it's the double kick. It's awesome. It's great.
Really, really good. And Errors in the History of the History of God, not the Holy God. Errors in the History of God is the next song. Very obtuse and a bit weird to start with. Fine, I'm okay with that. They're good at that. Simon Neil tells us that we're all trolls. He's got a point, isn't he? Very, very angular Biffy Clyro guitar part, which is like classic Biffy. Like you say, that kind of stabbing thing, which you go, that's a Biffy Clyro-ism now. Those kind of guitar riffs that you don't really know where the riff is actually going. That's very Biffy Clyro, those kind of weird angular guitar parts. And they haven't really done it to the extent that they do it here on the record at all. It's kind of become a calling card for them, I think. It sounds really nice. Again, more acousticy kind of folk bit that they bring in, some space rocky stuff. This kind of reminded me of something from that last Muse record, which we weren't very positive about at all. That last Muse record, were we? Well, I wasn't anyway. I'm not sure about you. I don't think you were either. And that was an awful album. I remember saying, like, I think this might just be an awful idea. But I think this song proves that it's not actually a bad idea. It's just that Muse are bad.
Well, I do
I mean,
disagree
look,
with that.
yeah, okay. I mean, this is not my favourite song on the album by any stretch of the imagination, I have to say. But I think the consistency has been very admirable, and I think the bass line on this song is really fucking great as well. So we've got a really great bass line. Yeah, it's an unusual hodgepodge of ideas, this song.
Yeah. Well, this is a little bit like Denier for me, in that, you know, for me it's not a highlight on the record, although it's not a song that I dislike either, but it feels like quite a typical Biffy Clyro song. And when you take a step back and look at that, that's quite a bonkers thing to say, because as you've rightly pointed out there, this is not an atypical rock song in any way, shape or form. It's really quite bizarre. But again, I just think this is another example of why Biffy Clyro are just so brilliant and just should be treasured in this country, like as one of the most forward-thinking bands in modern history.
It is that song. It's fine. It's sandwiched between Holy Water, which is great, and Hara Urara, which I fucking love. I love this song. I absolutely love it. This is like a smooth jazz 80s pop song that morphs into kind of acoustic indie. It's like Damien Rice meets Hue and Cry meets Battles. This song.
Oh, wow.
Right? It still sounds like Biffy, like everything on here does. This is exactly the sort of song. I'll tell you why I like it, right? It's exactly the sort of song that the fucking Twitter neckbeards on the download Twitter thing will be moaning about, getting fucked off about. They'd hear this because they have to wait 2 minutes before a distorted guitar comes in because they're so fucking boring they can't even wait 2 minutes. But this is fucking great, this song. It's fucking great. It's epic, catchy, it's unique, it's instantaneous, it's kind of simple despite being jazzy and weird and full all kinds of stuff. It's brilliant, and it's also 3.5 minutes long. It's like the perfect pop song. It's fucking great, this song.
But it feels really epic, doesn't it? It feels like it goes to a lot of different places. I got a big Barry White vibe from the beginning, and I'm totally A-OK with Biffy Clyro doing Barry White. That's absolutely fine with me. I'm certainly okay with them doing Barry White more than WAP. And then, filters down to that brilliant acoustic guitar and Simon vocal. Again, that unusual pattern in the song. I completely agree with you. I think this is a wicked song. Haru Araru.
Yeah, Hara Arura, I believe it's called. Unknown Male 01 starts like Let's Go Crazy by Prince. It's got that kind of Hammond organ. And then Simon comes in, it's just his voice. And his voice is... We haven't really spoken that much about Simon's voice. You know, one of the things I said when we were reviewing Trivium was that, you can tell Matt Heafy's voice is Matt Heafy. And I think that can often be enough to make a band... to give a band its entire identity. Biffy Clyro have a lot more than that, but equally no one else really sounds like Simon Neill. I mean, the guy from Twin Atlantic's Scottish, so I don't know if he counts as well. but but I don't think he does, because I wouldn't say that whoever sung Donald Where's Your Trousers sounds like Biffy Clyro as well. So I think Simon Neill's got an incredibly distinctive, unique voice. He's also got a brilliant singing voice as well, and he sounds luscious at the start of this song.
Yeah, it really does. I really love the heavenly synths and the way that Simon sounds, like you were just saying there. And then the way, again, like a lot of these songs, this begins electronic, and then the more traditional Biffy Clyro instrumentation that you expect from them begins to sort of come in slowly and build upon it, and I really, really like that. This, though,
hand claps, chunky riffs, that's the bit, around 2 minutes 15. It comes in and then it's gone again. I mean, there's a lot going on here. It's the joint longest song on the record. And the amount of ideas that are present on the song in general, I think it more than justifies its running time. But there's a fuckload of ideas. There is a lot of ideas going on here, and we've just really kind of started to scratch the surface of what happens in this song. It's a lot of different stuff.
One of the weirdest singles I can think of in recent memory. Weirdest choices for singles, I should say, because it's... I don't think it has... none of this is a criticism, because I think Unknown Male 01's a great song. I mean, maybe they chose it as a single because it's an unusual album, so they choose an unusual single to reflect an unusual record. But I don't think there's anything that really... I don't think the melodies stick in your mind instantly. Like, I can sing it in my head now because I've listened to this album sort of 5-6 times. But, you know, I don't think it's instant at all. I don't think it has a traditional sort of verse, chorus, verse structure. It's sort of part A, part B, part C. It's a Paranoid Android of a song in lots of ways. I don't think it's as good as Paranoid Android because Steady On. But you know, it's that kind of structure, and yet it's the first single. I think that's awesome and brave and wicked. But I am kind of boggled by it, mind boggled by it, but in a good way, not in a bad way. I think it's great.
Yeah, I think it's great as well. Really, really good. Very odd, but Biffy Clyro do odd really well. And it's never odd to the point that it ever feels alienating to me.
Exactly,
you know?
Exactly. They make it accessible somehow.
Existed. I did wonder if this was going to be the one that I was going to call a slight misstep on the record. It starts sounding like a bit of a kind of quite an airy electro, sound cloudy pop kind of thing. It's very slight, not necessarily strictly in a good way. And to be fair, from there it evolves quite a lot.
It does.
They add a lot of layers to the song. Fine, but. And Simon does a little bit of screaming on probably the most mellow song on the record as well.
Yeah, which is really
interesting juxtaposition.
Yeah, well, again, I mean, can you imagine them doing that on something like Rearrange from Ellipsis? I don't think they would have, but I think these albums allow them to try those things, and it works really well. Like that's my favourite bit of the song. In terms of the song as a whole, I would say I don't dislike it Existed. But it does pass me by somewhat. By the end, it has brought in like a lot of really cool elements, but for me, it's just a tiny bit too little, too late.
It's my least favourite song on the record.
It's the same. That's exactly what I was about to say. It's my least favourite song on the record, but I still think it's like a 6 or 7 out of 10. Like it's not I quite like it. I just don't love it.
I think a 6 out of 10 we should have stuck with, personally.
Okay. Yeah,
I'm happy with that. But that's the worst song on the record. And I think, without doubt, I would say the worst song on the record. Yeah. And I still don't think it's a total stinker.
No.
Yeah. Which leaves us with Slurpy, Slurpy, Sleep, Sleep. Which is the best song on the record. Much like Cop Syrup.
Yeah.
On the last record, they have saved the best to last, I think. This is fucking awesome. Proper 9 Inch Nails, electro, nihilism, what the actual fuck is going on right at the start.
Yeah.
And I did wonder if we were going to get a kind of companion piece to Cop Syrup where they went, very, very abrasive and very heavy. And while that isn't really this at all, it's got enough nods to shit like Killing Joke and a bit of Kraftwerk, probably kind of late 70s, early 80s Kraftwerk. Like I say, lots of 9 Inch Nails, even a little bit of mid-period Ironworks, Dillinger Escape Plan as well, that I can hear in there a little bit. And, or maybe even more kind of Greg's solo material more than Dillinger, maybe, in actual fact. But it's also got a very, very positive sentiment as well. Yeah. Don't waste your life, love everybody, being one of the big hooks on the song. Those are the lyrics. And the riff, there are a few bands in the early part of the late 90s and the early part of the 21st century who sort of tried to do big riffs, like hard rock riffs with electro music. Vast, do you remember Vast?
Yep.
That's got that one good song, haven't they? You can't tell me what to do anymore. Now I'm free. Now I'm free.
Long time since I've listened to Vast, if I'm honest.
Radiator, do you remember Radiator? They basically were like
you talk
Led
about Radiator
Zeppelin
quite a lot.
yeah. Led Zeppelin with like I quite like that record. The good ideas for bands, like a good idea to do a kind of. It was basically kind of trying to take the Prodigy and Led Zeppelin and sort of together.
Mash them together.
The idea that computers and synths could make classic rock songs. And Slurpy, Slurpy, Sleep, Sleep feels like that idea taken to its natural conclusion, to as kind of higher place and as good a place that it could get to, I think.
Yeah.
That all of those bands in the 90s that were sort of fumbling around with synthesizers and sort of trying to crank out vaguely Zeppelin-y, Sabbath-y, Deep Purple-y riffs, but still try and make them sound modern. Biffy Clyro have kind of taken that premise 2 decades later. I mean, no, it's not like they're the only people. And obviously the Klaxons and Shikari have been around and bands like that. This is definitely different.
Yes, definitely.
And they've done that, and they've actually done it, and you go, wow, this doesn't sound dated or compromised or cheesy or anything. Oh, I think this song is fucking so good. So good.
It doesn't sound particular to this time either, and I'm not sure if it ever will, because it's kind of, you know, there are distortions on Simon's voice and there are effects on it and stuff like that, but it's not that irritating auto-tune thing. It's just kind of more of a robotic sort of army kind of thing, almost like a Terminator thing. But then when this song comes in properly with, you know, those absolutely cataclysmic drums and that all that double pedal stuff, and I'm just like, you really feel it. It really kicks in and like hits you in the gut. And then there's these kind of Vangelis-esque soundscapes and wide expansive synths that are put on it as well. A couple of minutes into the song, it effortlessly changes into a far more driving, guitar-orientated riff before that angelic reverie of Simon singing before it ends, please give love to everyone, and all that positive sentiment. It's absolutely fucking brilliant, this song. Yeah, and I think it probably is my favourite on the record as well. I think it's a absolutely fantastic song, and I do see it as a companion piece to Cop Syrup in a way. But what's really nice is I was half expecting it to be a companion piece to Cop Syrup, and it is, but not in the way that I expected. And I really, really like that. I like having expectations and having them subverted into something which is equally as good, if not better, than what I thought. So, and Biffy do that.
Yeah, very good. And that's sort of, I guess, not a bad summation of the entire record, I would say, Remfry. Because for me, I'm going to say it, I don't know if this is really the 9th official proper studio album from Biffy Clyro. I feel like it's being marketed that way, and that we're kind of supposed to take it that way, and I can kind of understand why, because obviously they've not been able to tour or do many shows or blah, blah, blah. So a lot of people just want to get the next album out. We've been working on it, so we might as well treat it like a proper album. Fine. I really liked A Celebration of Endings, and I understand what you're saying in terms of that record being a more continuous solidification, is that a word? I'm not sure. Or like solidifying one cohesive piece that flows. This maybe goes into, I think, just by the nature of the record, I think it goes to more places, even though I'm not sure they ever get quite as heavy as Cop Syrup, but still I think broadly overall they do go to more places. That thing, it's going to be positive but nihilistic. It's going to be heavier, but it's going to be more melodic. It is that. And for me, song for song, I think I'd take this over A Celebration of Endings. If I was offered one, you can have that one or that one, I think I'm having the Myth of Happily Ever After. And that's quite a big thing to say, because I really did and do like A Celebration of Endings. I think it's really, really good. Yeah. But having sat with this for about a week or so now, and having listened to it a fair old bit, I feel pretty comfortable and happy in saying that I prefer this record.
I don't think the Myth of the Happily Ever After is as cohesive as A Celebration of Endings, and overall I don't quite think it is as good either. But I certainly, that is one of those opinions where, you know, if you say I prefer the Myth of Happily Ever After to Celebration of Endings, I'm like, yeah, well, fair play. I think there's more than enough on here to justify that as an argument. There's no single song on the Myth of Happily Ever After that I like on the album as much as I like Cop Syrup or End Of. Would be the two that I would choose from Celebration of Ending. But for the songs that I do really like on the record, Holy Water, Witch's Cup, A Hunger in Your Heart, Slurpy, Slurpy, Sleep, Sleep, I'm grateful that Billy are I'm grateful that Biffy are willing to sift through those ideas, and I think it says a lot about them that they're able to come up with an album as good as this from those ideas, and as, you know, whilst maybe not as cohesive as a Celebration of Endings, it's still very cohesive and still very much feels like its own album and its own project, whilst also having those connotations with the sister album to a Celebration of Endings. I think it's fucking awesome.
It's really good. It's really, really good. And if this is the shit they've got lying around,
yeah,
like, that's mad.
Yeah.
Do you reckon Green Day had 15 songs of significant quality to Father of All Motherfuckers line? I mean, fucking hell, I feel like I've got 15 songs of significant quality to Father of All Motherfuckers lying around. I don't even own a guitar or any musical instruments, but I still feel like I could probably knock one of them out in half an hour or so. But it's rare. It's really fucking rare that a band can, you know, for me, it's a bit, I prefer it. Is it a better album? I don't know if it's a better album. I think song for song, I think it is superior. I do, like, you're right. I think Cop Syrup still remains a song where you go, oh fucking hell, that is really good. But song for song, I do prefer, if you're going to go like track by track, there's not many times where the one off a Celebration of Endings. There are a few. It's tight. It's probably like, you know, 6-4 or something, or 6 to 5-6 or whatever. But yeah, really good.
I like
really,
as many.
Very good.
I like as many of the songs on this record as I do on a Celebration of Endings, and I would also say that I wasn't very clear in my distinction if I preferred one to the other until I re-listened to a Celebration of Endings. So I will chuck that in. Okay. But when I did put a Celebration of Endings on after my 4th listen to this record, I did go, oh no, actually, I do prefer that record, and I do think it's a better record. But it's, you know, that's not the point. So yeah, that's just my feeling on it.
Okay, cool. All right, good. Well, there you go. That is Biffy Clyro, their 9th studio album. We're happy to call it that. The Myth of the Happily Ever After. Go out and listen to it. It comes out on the 22nd of October, which is Friday, if you're listening to this the day that we put it out. I think. We put this out straight away, aren't we? Good for us.
Yeah, more or less.
Just gonna smash it out straight away. Get it out. So that'll be out for you to listen to come Friday. And we'll also be a Riot Act podcast on Friday as well for you to listen to. If you're not sick of listening to our shit, which you probably are. Anyway, we better get going because you might be sick of listening to our shit. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.